Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast. I am, of course, Nick McDaniel, and as always, I am joined by my buddy Myron.
Greetings and happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
You know what's funny? Yeah. How did the realization not hit me until today that is when this episode drops? It's actually on Thanksgiving.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's always on Thursday, so shit doesn't change, but I sometimes just the light bulb doesn't go off with me.
It happens like that sometimes. My light bulbs don't go off as much as they used to anymore myself. Well, folks, you know, if we had our wish, we would be in Winston-Salem, North Carolina on Friday. WrestleCade, my favorite time of the year. Better than Christmas, better than Thanksgiving, my birthday, and every other holiday combined is WrestleCade for me. It's the most wonderful time of the year, to steal somebody else's catchphrase. But due to COVID, we're here. We're home.
You know what's funny? My wife gave me a brilliant idea, and I actually thought about shooting out a message later today. She was like, why don't Saturday, why don't y'all all like get a 6-pack of beer, do a Zoom call, and sit around and like do like a recorded session of stuff of you guys sitting around talking and telling stories about WrestleCade.
Wow.
I was like, that ain't bad. That ain't bad at all.
That's not a bad idea at all, Nick. Your wife should be on the creative team for us if she's going to keep up with good ideas like that. Shit.
Damn, you're not kidding. But if we did it, we would have to, because of the content that would be released, it would only be able to be released in one place, Myron.
Patreon.
Exactly. Patreon.com/tappedoutpod. First of all, foremost, guys, bear with us this week. There was massive technical issues, which we're not even going to get into as to why the show, but this is where we typically drop the show early. Yes. It's still going to be early, just not as early as typical, that it typically is. But hey, we appreciate all you guys who head over to patreon.com/tappedoutpod, sign up, get the show early. I'm actually going to drop another thing. Myron, tell them a little bit about what's that other thing they can check out.
I was going to record a commercial for Jarrett Parsons Entertainment. They have a lot of good holiday toys and holiday gifts coming out, especially. You got to see the commercial. Well, we wound up doing about 40 minutes of shooting the shit and talking about Norvell Austin with Adam Parsons of the Jarrett Parsons Wrestling Network. It will be something I think everyone will enjoy, because if you just like talking shop or talking crap, this was awesome, man.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
Check it out over again, patreon.com/tappedoutpod. Sign up today, get that kind of stuff exclusive there, and of course get our show early as always. But let's jump into the meat of it, man, because I know a lot of people thought we're heading into Thanksgiving, man. It's what we got to be thankful for. We're going to be thankful for one thing here shortly, but first and foremost, it was Survivor Series Sunday.
And it was a good pay-per-view.
Oh, dude, it was a very good pay-per-view. I posted on social media, during the show, that going all the way up to the main event, like the show had really delivered up to that point. Yeah, I thought they did a really good job. Even in matches that I didn't think would be, I don't want to say anything special. It just top to bottom. I thought the show, especially the main event, delivered.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed all of the women's stuff. They had some phenomenal matches on that card. The Taker part at the end was very emotional. I like to see a pay-per-view that holds my attention for the most of it. And for the most part, this pay-per-view held my attention. You're never going to get to 100% with me because I'm scatterbrained as more than ever now. But I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed this one. Wasn't dreading it. I didn't get to watch it Sunday night. Watched it Monday night. Man, that was great.
Yeah, I do wish the Survivor Series would kind of escape this Raw, SmackDown, brand rivalry, and maybe go back to the old, teams of 5, build up storylines or whatever. I mean, we talked about it ad nauseum, but that this would have been where Retribution could have made their major impact and been a player. They're done. I mean, they're done. But for all that being said, like I said, just the match. I mean, Asuka, Sasha delivered. Sasha gets a win finally. It was one of those. Yeah. She finally overcomes Asuka. Asuka has her number. But there was something special about, and I know everybody's going to crap on there was interference at the end, the ref bump, etc. Roman and Drew really delivered in the sense of, did you notice at points how slow and methodical the match was? They had the parts obviously where they picked up the pace, but it was old school in some spots where I was like, dude, they were just working some headlock, I mean, and I kind of laughed when I saw it. I was like, just grab that whole headlock and cinch it in.
Work it in there. Lock it in.
I went back to that funny video Damian Bennett and Ike Cross did, not Ike Cross, but yeah.
I need to get that. I need to find that and like put it somewhere where I can watch it on a regular basis.
Yeah. But so anywho, but listen, I mean, I'd love to know what fans think of the whole Survivor Series as a whole. I got some comments when I posted that about people enjoying it. But let us, share your thoughts. What tappedoutpod at gmail.com, of course. I'm rolling my eyes before I say it. If the Facebook video gets to stay up this week, obviously you can comment below if you're watching in there as well. We'll see. Look, guys, we're working on it. We bear with us. It is what it is. But let us know your thoughts on Survivor Series. But at the core, Myron, there's really one thing. And honestly, folks, this is it. This was the show. We originally at one point thought there was going to be a lot to talk about. There's one real thing to talk about.
Yeah.
And that was Taker hanging it up at Survivor Series.
That man wrestled 60% of our lives, Nick. In the WWE.
Yeah. I was about to say longer than that when you tack in the other stuff.
In the WWE. Not counting that wonderful video of him and Bruiser Brody that he was talking about in the first Broken Skull sessions. I saw that match. And it's pretty much exactly the way he remembered it.
Yep.
Brody took it out on him and taught him some lessons. Texas Red, Skyscrapers, whatever other group he was in, Mean Mark Callis, the Master, was he Master of Pain or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's not even counting towards these 30 years.
Yeah.
I'm pushing 50 and he's been wrestling in the WWE 30 years. So he's probably been 35 years plus in the business. Someone who's contributed on a scale I don't think many people have. Someone who is, we always talk about merch is a great thing. This man has sold merch in 3 decades. Okay, this man is a highlight. This man is a headliner anytime he comes out. I don't think anybody's bigger than Undertaker. I don't think anybody's more significant to Vince McMahon. I think he is actually more significant than Hulk Hogan because he has never really once done anything that caused Vince any problems. He was a company man through and through. He did what he had to do. He did the silly stuff when they told him to do silly stuff. He did the great stuff when they told him to do great stuff. And that's the biggest compliment I can give somebody.
No, I'm with you, agree, man. But what we thought we would do is we would take a walk down memory lane, share some of our, here's the funny thing, guys. This is kind of the second time we've done this because after that particular WrestleMania, which we'll discuss here in a second, we all thought that was it. So we did a whole thank you Taker show and all this kind of stuff. So obviously some things have changed since then. Some new moments have happened. But we wanted to do some some of our favorite Undertaker moments. And then we put it out there. I put a post out there and some people responded and kind of shared some of theirs. And we're going to share those too as well. But we're just going to walk through them and kind of go through some of them and share our thoughts on them. And we hope you guys enjoy it, as much as we did taking that walk down memory lane.
But slow entrance to the ring.
Yeah.
Just like Taker.
I think obviously you got to start Survivor Series, right? 90, like his debut. Where else do you go from there? You have to start there, right, Myron?
Oh, of course. With Brother Love, of all people. Kane the Undertaker.
That just, when we saw that then, obviously it scared the bejesus out of us if we were little kids, right? That kind of thing. Which obviously I wasn't a little kid, but but little kids it scared the bejesus out of. But it was just kind of ironic that when we saw that character then, would you have ever wrapped your mind around the fact if somebody told you then that 30 years later this guy was still going to be like one of the top, Mount Rushmore figures in wrestling?
No, I would not have. I would not have, because there was so much on that pay-per-view that didn't exist anywhere else ever again.
Yeah,
Are petered out quickly. This is Probably one of the biggest introductions of anyone in the history of the WWE.
Yeah. And kind of let's move on and let's go to obviously after he'd been there about a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, here we are. Taker, I mean, 1 year in the business and he's beating Hulk Hogan for the for the big belt, right?
Yep.
I mean, how crazy is that?
That's insane. That's totally insane.
And
man,
time flies, man. I mean, I was like, when he wins that belt, we're like, holy crap! Like he legit like beat Hulk Hogan, and nobody beat Hogan then.
Nope.
That was, I think, the biggest shock of all. Obviously, there was an inference with Ric Flair and all that, whatever. But I think after that, I mean, I know he lost it shortly after that. Do you still think at that point he's a made man?
Yeah, Taker's never been one to have a belt. He's an attraction with or without a belt, and I think people focus so much on belts sometimes that they don't realize that's not about where your business is. He's an attraction. He's bigger than a belt. He transcends that. And he got a belt, and he's had several belts over the years. But this is pretty impressive to win it in your first year.
You brought up about being did you? Because that's the funny thing that they discussed it on the Broken Skull session too, about like when people don't really think about it. Like he's a 7-time champion. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's awkward when you think about it to be like, nobody really thinks about him being like you clearly know he was Undertaker, right? Like clearly he was the champion.
Mm-hmm.
But 7 times, like you think of guys like Ric Flair and you look, Triple H and stuff holding these belts. I mean, over John Cena's, whatever. But you don't really think of Taker as like the champion.
Mm-mm. You think of Taker. I mean, he's bigger than belts.
Oh yeah. Well, there's always been something going on. Like for example, I mean, he obviously Kane, right?
Yeah.
Kane debuts at Bad Blood. I mean, first of all, they built a whole entire match was built, and he discusses this a little bit on there as well. Like that's what this match was built for, was for Kane's debut to break into the cage. Like that was the whole entire point for the Hell in the Cell cage. It wasn't for him and Shawn to have this great match. It was built to bring in Kane.
Yeah, and that's a big entrance right there.
And the crazy thing is, in the midst of it all, him and Shawn had a phenomenal match. That's what's crazy about it, even more so.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Never disappointed. And when you talk about the Kane coming in, Austin's talking to Taker on Broken Skull sessions about it, and he basically says he thinks that Kane and Taker, their story, could possibly be one of the greatest stories ever told in pro wrestling, because it's a 20 plus year story.
Yeah. It was something consistent. It was something that always worked, something that always drew. Some people loved Brothers of Destruction. It was solid, man.
Whether they were feuding, whether they were partners, whether they were, the whole thing. They over 2 decades. I think he said it was like 23 years. Their story just weaved in and out of each. They would be apart, to be together. Off and on. They were friends. They were allies. They were obviously brothers, but they were foes at times. It's like, is Kane and Taker one of the greatest stories that they've in and out of time over the last 23 years?
Well, no story lasts that long. No. I don't know if there's another one. I mean, somebody might be able to come up with something from Memphis or something like that, but I don't think any other stories ever lasted that long.
Well, I mean, you could make the argument of, your Lawler Dundees and your Lawler, Austin Idols and Tommy Rich in Memphis. But in the grand scheme of things, like on the consistent basis, just constant, those two there, that story just, I don't know that it gets any, and especially the depths that they went into of the story, I guess is more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, but at that moment, the first time he's staring in, you can see like this, that was the whole thing. He said he loved the psychology of that. Was the first time he got to look at somebody and you could see a little bit of hesitation and fear in the Undertaker.
Yeah.
So it got to take him to a place of, you're a badass monster, just walking through everybody. Eventually, how cool is it to find somebody who pushes back? That's bigger and stronger. So, yeah. Let's keep it moving. Obviously there's not an Undertaker list without this moment, right?
Nope. One of the greatest moments in wrestling history.
Yeah. I mean, now, let me ask you this, because when I, this was on our audience list as well. But I want to ask you something. So that moment happens. Is it the match that makes your list, or is it that particular moment that makes most people's list?
Well, there's another slam through the cage too,
Correct.
but that moment to me, the match would have made the list. It would have had to make the list without that moment. But that moment to me is more important than the match itself. That moment, the JR call, it Foley was over. It was crazy. I mean, Mick Foley never got. I mean, he just rocketed from there. It was an amazing scene. It's something I would think a lot of wrestling fans have shown to non-wrestling people, and they've been shocked by it. It's one of the first really big, shocking wrestling falls. Some people have tried to duplicate year and year and year, but that's one of the biggest ones, man. That's one of the moments in wrestling history that just sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, Sean in the previous Hell in a Cell that we talked about had the bump where he was kind of on the side of the cage and he stomped his hands and he, fell off onto the table. Of course, Mick being tossed. If you haven't, by the way, Broken Skull Sessions 2, go out of your way on the WWE Network and watch it, because he goes into a lot of these moments, that we're talking about here. And him literally saying, the first one, I've heard this one before where he said, it was like an out of body experience. Like when he tossed him, he was like, I could see myself like looking down. Like it was the craziest thing. But the moment, when Mick went through the cage and went into the ring, he tells the story of like he genuinely had fear because he could hear the things popping. He was supposed to stand on the main part of the cage with him when he slammed him, but he heard those little things popping, and he goes, and for a brief second, he thought about it and he stepped back onto the bar, like onto the bracing of the cage.
Yeah.
And he's like, had he not, he goes, this is the scary part to think about. He would have gone down through the cage with him and probably landed on top of Mick. Like he would have been on, and he was like, and probably could have killed him, because he probably would have landed on top of him as he fell all that way onto it. And literally, he said from the angle he saw, he thought Mick landed on his head. Like he literally thought he could have had a broken neck and he was paralyzed. And he goes, the whole time I'm trying to stay in character, the thought going through my head is, please move, Mick. He just wanted to see him move.
Yeah.
To make sure he wasn't paralyzed. Like that's, like that was his biggest concern at that point, was I just needed him to move.
Wow.
It's crazy to think about. So again, lots of stories to share. This next moment particularly is on my list. And I'll tell you why. So at Judgment Day, of course, he parts ways with the Dead Man character and breaks out the American Badass character. Now, why? As he put it, he discusses this a little bit on Broken Skull Sessions and talks about he had kind of done everything he could do as the Dead Man. Mm-hmm. It's kind of one of those, they were going into the Attitude Era at its peak. You got more realistic characters. He was like, I just felt like I had to evolve to progress.
Yeah, that was smart.
Yeah. I mean, Chris Jericho calls him the Madonna of the WWE, because he constantly evolves and changes, and he was trying to stay ahead of the curve so that he wouldn't, become, he wouldn't become irrelevant.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously I love the music. I was a big Kid Rock guy, but just the character itself, I think, was a good, but he still kept the trench coat. So it was close enough, that people didn't completely run away from it. So, I mean, were you a fan of the bad? Because a lot of people either pick one or the other.
Because this was the Taker that I had my Taker moment from. 2000, it was Armageddon in Birmingham at the Birmingham Justin Civic Center. The main event was a 6-man Hell in a Cell. In the middle, I had a probably third or fourth row aisle seat on the floor. Taker, I can't remember who he comes after through the crowd, after someone. And at that moment, the camera cut to Rikishi coming off the cage. But if the camera stayed in its place, they would have seen me, much younger, 20 years younger, sitting in a chair in awe, looking up as Undertaker stood about 2 feet in front of me, and he looked like he was 1,000 feet tall, and the arena lights was behind his head, and he dripped blood from where he had been busted open. Some of it got on my boot. Um, I was shocked and awed. That moment is just absolutely tattooed on my brain. It doesn't matter if he was the dead man or the badass or whatever. That moment of the majesty that was Undertaker just is something I can never forget. That was than bigger than anything else. One of my favorite wrestling memories. One of the best like photographs that are in my head is that picture right there. Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's what it's about, moments, man.
It is. It's all about moments, and the moments kept coming in 2010 when Paul Bearer returned. He had been gone for a while, but he comes back, and obviously, the power of the urn is what he needed, what Taker needed to come back, and he bounces back, and there's not. I mean, this moment makes my list, and it's for a couple reasons. Obviously, I was just happy Percy got a shot to come back, and kind of get back in the family, and he did some more stuff with them, obviously. And if you haven't watched Broken Skull Sessions, you should, because you'll hear how much that guy meant, to the Taker character. And even, and as Mark Calloway said, even what he meant to him, I mean, it was a good thing for both. So, I mean, obviously that moment had to be there. Because no moments, did any moment give you any bigger cushion, anybody give you just the goosebumps of when, even, at this year's Survivor Series, as he's doing his speech, he drops to the knee and Paul Bearer comes up on the screen and the Tron, and they play look, man, that was awesome. I'm glad that they understand the contributions of one Paul Bearer to that character in the long run. So, our next couple moments, they're back. Here's where you're going to go on a streak, no pun intended, of his moments. But first, let's look. Obviously WrestleMania 25, which most people consider the perfect match. Shawn Michaels just once said, I don't know if I've ever worked a perfect wrestling match, but that one, if there was one, that was it. And let's put them hand in hand. Obviously, the next year he would have that, second match where he actually retired Shawn at WrestleMania 26. And, I mean, it's a 2-part moment when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, right? I still to this day say that I think that he is correct with Shawn Michaels. That is pronouns, right? That it probably is the as far as the wrestling match goes. We all know that the best WrestleMania match, we've had that conversation on a different show. But as far as like technical ring work, storytelling, 25 is probably it. And here's the crazy thing: storytelling over a 2-year window where they put together, between those two matches and Shawn walking away. And kudos, by the way, to Shawn for at least he did stay gone for a while. For pretty much everybody thought he was done. So, after that, obviously he strolled in, had his feud with Triple H, which brings us to our next moment, the end of an era match. Which here's the funny part: we all thought at that point that was it, right? There was a moment there where we thought this is the moment where he's actually going to retire. Little did we know. We weren't even close, because, he would go on, of course, at 30. This is going to probably be one of the most controversial moments, when you have those conversations. And, again, here's the crazy thing. Brock Lesnar ending the streak. And I know I've plugged this 100 times, and I'm probably going to plug it 100 more times before the show's over. On Broken Skull, like Taker says, he showed up to Mania that day going over in that match.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like, literally, when he got there, he was under the impression he was going over. And he was like, I knew Vince McMahon walked into the room. Vince came looking for him.
Yeah.
He goes, when I saw the old man walk into my dressing room, he goes, in my head, I was sitting there thinking, I know. Like, he already knew. He's like, the old man doesn't come looking for you on WrestleMania Day.
Yeah.
Unless it's a big deal. And he's like, he knew. And I want to see if you agree or disagree. He said he never had any issues with losing to Brock. First of all, it's the boss's company, so he's going to tell you what you're going to do anyway. which kudos to him for understanding that. But two, he did say he wished it had been Roman, 2 years later, because he goes, what did it, like, Brock beating him and did nothing for Brock.
Well, Brock was a huge badass even at that time, but I think you really get, to me, I thought more of Brock after this, that he could beat Undertaker. Like, it was an icon. It's more than a wrestler. It was an icon, and Brock took that guy down, and it adds to his credibility in my eyes.
But here's the thing, though. It's not a matter of should Brock beat him or not. It was like, Brock did, I mean, really. Now, Vince's pitch to him was, if not Brock, who? If anybody could beat you, it'd be Brock, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But he just felt like, but Brock could have beat him at, the Rumble. Brock could have beat him at Survivor Series. But at WrestleMania, for that loss, it should have been saved for somebody who, like, it could take them for a decade and make them better. Brock, it helped for 2 years, essentially.
Well, the thing is, Brock's the biggest attraction they have now.
But he's gone.
He'll be back.
I mean, maybe he's made enough money he doesn't need to come back. And I think ultimately that's where he's saying, like, think about what it would have changed, which we're going to discuss here shortly. But let's go ahead and show it, right? So at 33, when he loses to Roman, he leaves the hat, he leaves he leaves all the gear in the ring. So my question to you, what does that do for Roman's career? Because think about Roman's career over those last couple years after that.
Yeah, it's helped Roman immeasurably.
Well, did it? People crapped on him. Now, look, let's not get into the fact that the match was bad. Taker said it was bad. Taker says he shouldn't have been in the ring. He shouldn't have been wrestling at all. That match should have never happened. But what I'm saying, though, is what if, when Brock ended that streak, because the streak's over. Beating Undertaker, here's the problem now. Roman can go on and say, like, well, I'm only one of two guys to beat him but somebody else has done it.
Yeah.
If Roman was the guy who ended the streak, I think there's more, there's something a little more special about it than, being just another guy that beat him.
There'll never be another streak. There'll never be a streak. No way it can go on that long.
Austin on Broken Skull says the same exact thing. He goes, because two things. One, guys don't wrestle that long.
No.
Two, you got to keep a character on top long enough to wrestle on a WrestleMania card 30 times. Or not for 30 years, but for 20-something times.
Yeah.
That's the challenge. So you have to be good enough to be kept wrestling on a WrestleMania and to be in a prominent role for that long too. And he was like, he went on, like, he gave off the crazy stats. Like, Triple H is like, I can't remember, it was something ridiculous. I mean, it really is. He's like 11-13 or something like that. I mean, he's not even close, and that's just the crazy thing. But he's like, Rock, Austin, nobody's close. And then you got to have a guy, like I said, who's not beaten early in his career to even get there. And as he pointed out, until WrestleMania 10, it was organic. It was never a conversation. Nobody even thought about it. Like, nobody realized it.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, when he beats Ric Flair, he's like, does the 10. Like, that was the first time anybody had ever even thought about it.
Wow.
Like Michael Hayes, I think he said, made some comment about, you realize we ain't ever beat Taker, And then he was kind of like, oh.
Nope.
Nobody just really thought. But again, and think about it, because you got to have a guy that you pick from day one that you don't beat in year 2 at a WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem. You would have to try to organically make it happen, and it doesn't. So, obviously, it clearly, with him riding off into the sunset a bit, no pun intended, right? Boneyard at this year's WrestleMania. Let me ask you this before we move too far in.
Mm-hmm.
the question comes up of like, oh, I could do more. Could you do more of those type of matches? They'd be recorded. You wouldn't have to do them live. You wouldn't be in a ring, blah, blah, blah. But here's my question, Myron. Would they ever be as good because they're just the next one?
No. It did what it did. It did what it needed to. It was a statement piece. It was the best one that's ever been done, in my opinion. It had everything you needed. I was in awe. I thought this was going to be crap. It was one of the best things I've ever seen. The theatrical type matches really have never been something I liked. But this was great, and we don't need it again. That's what a lot of people don't get. We don't need to keep seeing this over and over again. Let's have a treasured moment and make it special. Let's not do it every year. It's not special if you do it every year.
It's not, like I said, I agree with that part. Like, but my thing is, I don't think, like, if there was another one and then another one, they're always going to be compared to the first one, which is hard to always, it's always harder for the sequel to be better than the original, right? That's what they always say. There's only a handful of times where it's, Empire Strikes Back, right? That's the only time that, that kind of thing, which is debatable, I guess, by many. But that's just my take. They're wrong. I mean, but yes, Empire's better than the original Star Wars.
Yeah, that's not up for send us a message to tell us what you think about it. You can stick that in your pie hole. Yeah. That's the better one.
I don't mean to sidebar, but Empire's the ultimate heel movie.
Yes.
It ends with the heels winning. It's a heat movie.
Yes.
I've tried to explain that to people, and they're kind of like, yes, Empire's the...
What's the difference? But seriously, though, what is the difference between wrestling and good movies? And when it all works, it's all the same concept. Protagonist, antagonist, build heat, come back. Always great.
Yeah. And it always needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. No pun. I mean, that sounds so simple. Eric Bischoff always talks about storytelling and how important it is. It's a match level, macro level, and story. Everything is true, but, and hopefully, like I said, that was, what we got at 36, hopefully, was the happy ending and the riding off into the sunset. But, hey, listen, this right here, if you haven't watched, I would swear you would think I'm getting paid by the WWE Network to plug this, right? The one more round, Broken Skull Sessions with Austin and Taker, phenomenal. I can't put it over enough because I already have. The story, and I think this is the evolution of, this is where, when, a lot of people are like, oh, do you think he's going to come back? He's going to wrestle again. Well, we're going to see. But I'm eager to see these type of things where he's telling the stories and so forth and so on. But before we get too far in, man, I want to share some of the memories of the guys that send in some stuff with us as well. Obviously, this moment is actually, it's funny that it's Undertaker, but it's the moment I feel like Jeff Hardy was made. It was a ladder match on Raw.
Definitely as a singles competitor.
Yeah. But Taker did it. They sprinkled some of that Taker dust, on Jeff Hardy, and Jeff Hardy hung with him in that ladder match, and then everybody, after that, Jeff Hardy, instant credibility.
Yes.
And that came in from Tyler Culprit, by the way. Ric Flair versus Taker, WrestleMania 18. So there's a great moment in this, the one more round, where they're talking about this, and it's a kind of ironic moment here when, Taker was like, he was given two options for this match, by the way. He could wrestle Ric Flair or Rob Van Dam. And he was like, Vince was like, you can work with Rob Van Dam or Ric Flair. And he goes, I don't even know that he got Flair out. And I said, Ric Flair.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, you don't want to work with Rob? He's like, look, I got plenty of time to work with Rob.
Yeah.
But Ric Flair, and a great story about, Rick was you've heard this from Ric Flair as well. He was in a bad place at the time. He had lost his confidence. But there's he shoots him in, he doesn't make the flip, and then he backs him into the corner, and he's, like, hey, you want to try this again, kid? And they do it, and he hits it. Cool moment in the match, obviously. And then after the match in the back, he's like, Ric Flair came up to me, shook my hand, and said, thank you.
Wow.
Like, you've like helped get my confidence back or whatever. And Taker was like, even Taker reverenced and said in this whole thing of like, Ric Flair's the greatest, pro wrestler of all time. And he was like, when Ric Flair tells me this, he goes, I kind of like, you're Ric Flair. Like, what are you talking? Kind of the same reaction, that Austin gives. Everybody's like,
Yeah.
but you're Ric Flair. And he goes, but the funny thing is, he never understood it, what Ric Flair meant by that, until he got hurt in that match with Brock. He said when he got hurt by Brock, it shattered his confidence. Like he became mortal. He thought now all of a sudden, he could be injured, he could be hurt, he could, he might not recover. Like it literally, Ray goes, and in that moment, I understood what Rick meant. And it's just the cool, like I said, those stories are the kind of things that I'm looking for, more of from him. And I think down the road are going to be awesome. WrestleMania 20, Greg, buddy over from the DDT Archives, said it was at Madison Square Garden when this happened. American Badass goes away, the dead man comes back. And I think by that time, American Badass had, played out its course, obviously. And what did were we not just all screaming for his return? Like everybody wanted the dead man back.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so that was, cool, super cool moment. There's a shot that was on social media this weekend, and a couple of old guys like me and you, right? Yeah. We saw this picture, and it hit home on a lot of levels. This right here, to me, this shot is the old gunslinger who, everything that happened in the ring. I know a lot of people complained about what happened in the ring. But this shot of Undertaker, sitting in the back, it was on his social media, and we were talking about it, how it's like, as an old man, there comes a point when you're like, I just can't do what I used to do.
Yeah, it's been hard for me to admit that, I'll be honest with you.
And to see that shot, that's it's heartbreaking in a way. I mean, that you sit there and you see it, and you're just kind of like, again, you brought up 30 years of our life. I mean, I'm 47 years old. You know what I mean? And I'm like, so I was a teenager. I was in high school.
Oh yeah. I was in high school
when he started in WWE. And I'm sitting here thinking, he could go for like the entire, like my entire, from 17 on, my brain, it was always Taker's the best. Taker's one of the best. Taker can go. To now, to have that same mortality as us, when we sit there and look, to just say, like, on Broken Skull Sessions, he says, I've got the passion. I've got the heart. I want to do it. I just ain't got the tools to do it anymore. And I think that's the moment of a reality. And that's what I labeled that picture was locker room reality, of that last moment when you sit in that locker room and you go, I just can't do it anymore. And so that's why I'm done. That crosses over from life, all sports, football players back. There comes a day when I remember, you ever think about the last hit you took when you realized, like, I just physically can't do this anymore?
I've had this recently come up with me at work and other things in my life, and it's been really hard to accept. And seeing it with Taker, I mean, I get where he's coming from. I get what he's feeling, and it's not easier to see a hero feel the same thing that you're feeling your own inadequacies and working that way. But it's going to happen to all of us. And Mark has been there through the majority of my life. He's been there through the best parts of my life and some of the worst. He was a consistent. He was a constant. He was always there. A world without Taker is kind of strange to think about. But thank you, Taker.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of where we were on Thanksgiving. We were just like, listen, lots of things we could talk about, but hey, hopefully this ride's not completely over, in the sense of, listen, I think the whole Vince McMahon doing it on, coming out there and saying what he said, there's a part of me at my core that doesn't believe Vince McMahon was ever going to believe that The Undertaker was gone until he said it, like in a ring, on a mic. And, because now all the stories are breaking that, Vince has basically said, like, he's not going to ask him to wrestle again. Like, he's going to let him ride off into the
That's
sunset.
unbelievable.
It's respect. And you could see Vince just choking through that speech when he was talking about it. And that's if you've watched The Last Ride, you saw very similar loyalty like no other when it came in pro wrestling. I think clearly that I think Vince is going to let him hopefully ride off into the sunset like he should at this point. Look, we can all debate that it should have happened and years ago, whatever. And then we hear a lot of people complain about, well, he deserved better than a goodbye in front of an empty arena. Okay, we didn't predict this. We didn't predict the pandemic, right? So clearly and simple, if it's time, if Undertaker realizes now is the time and I need to do this, there's no point in him waiting around until crowds come back to do it. Just do it. There was no better place than the 30th anniversary of Survivor Series. His debut is his retirement official, whatever. And listen, folks, you're going to get a Hall of Fame speech, whether it's in front of folks or not. Who honestly, you want my opinion? This is going to sound blasphemous. I hate the fans at a lot of the Hall of Fame. They drive me bananas with the chants. I want the wrestlers to be able to get up there. I get it. WWE can pump it in. Like if they don't have fans when he goes in, they can pump in sound like they're pumping in sound now into the buildings, and I won't care because they'll get to control the narrative when those chants happen, and they won't be stupid chants at inopportune times for guys giving a Hall of Fame speech.
Please just let Michael Hayes be there, like in a chair on the front row in full Michael Hayes garb. That'll make it special for me too.
Absolutely. So hopefully we'll get our Hall of Fame speech. Hopefully it'll be this year. Going into WrestleMania, we're gonna see. Listen, guys, and I fully aware, as you probably can tell, there ain't no George Andy talk this week. It is what it is. If it makes you feel better, I'll flash the screen at you, but there's no talk because this week, this is all it was about. Thanks, saying thanks for Thanksgiving Day to the Undertaker, coming in, coming out, doing his thing. So that's where I wanted it as far as to end it. As far as the show, I'm not really going to discuss anything other topics. It is what it is.
We're going to need Kleenex if too long.
Exactly.
Guys, think about what you're thankful for. Think about the things that are important to you in life, your family, whatever things you put value in. I'm thankful for this podcast and the people I've met through it. I'm thankful for the friends I've made in wrestling. I'm thankful for all the great memories. I'm thankful for the fact that WrestleCade will come back one year. I think about it all the time. I think about what we've missed in this last year, but we're both still sitting here alive, Nick. And that means hopefully nothing else will kill us so we can go get some more of these good memories. Thank you, people. Thanks to every fan who's not just came up and said hello to me, every fan who's ever listened or watched one of these things. You mean the world to me.
Absolutely. We're thankful that you guys you subscribe, as you can see, Apple Podcasts, iHeartMedia, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, name it. I'm starting to push the YouTube for the video show. But of course, listen, guys, everybody's asked me, like, you can go to Patreon, you can watch the video there. You don't have to pay to see the video when it comes out on its regular time. But if you do subscribe, you get it early. That's the plus the extras that are there. That is at patreon.com/tappedoutpod. But you can subscribe to the podcast version on all of your podcast platforms. We greatly appreciate it, and I want to say thanks again as we head out of here. Hey, you got anything else, man?
I got nothing, folks.
Well, what's the old saying, brother? If I've got nothing and you've got nothing, what time is it?
It's time to tap out.